Mission Impossible has hit the box office, but what are the results? Has Tom Cruise saved the movie theaters yet again, the same as he did with Top Gun Maverick? Well, we've got the results. They may surprise you. And we also have some information about a certain Imax war that's coming up, just as a war breaks out between Hollywood and the Hollywood creators. All right, folks, welcome back to another joyous day here on the WDW Pro channel. What a pleasure it is that you have chosen to join us. And we are here to explain entertainment, keep you ahead of the culture curve. Attempting to do so with us is Lorne Connor of ThatPartPlace.com, resident guru of all things Star Wars, Lucasfilm, etc., and generally just an all-around smart guy. Lorne, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, sir.
Absolutely. All right, folks, as we dive into this, if you like content like it, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe. When you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. You know what it is. It's that notification bell. We begin today with a journey through The Hollywood Reporter as we take a look at what is happening with the box office. And for one of the first times, I am disappointed. I'm a little bit saddened by this one. We'll talk about why. Mission Impossible 7 heads for $78 million box office opening. Sound of Freedom holds at number 2. This by Pamela McClintock. We love Pam. Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is also opening overseas for a projected global start of $240 million. Lauren, let me explain a few of these things right off the bat. First of all, $78 million for the 5-day for Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible. Not good. That's not where we would want this film to be if it's going to be fantastic. In fact, when they were projecting this at $90 million, that I thought was a little bit low. $100 million is where this movie needed to be domestically. But something strange is happening. Despite the low domestic turnout, $240 million overall indicates that worldwide this is doing quite well. And Mission Impossible films tend to leg out at about 3 times what their opening is. That would put this aiming somewhere for about $750 million overall should that trend continue. And that would not be too shabby. The other odd thing that's happening right now is Sound of Freedom. All of the Hollywood intelligentsia is big time against that film, and yet it will not die, it will not go down. They can't stand it. Let's read the article. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is headed for a 5-day debut of $78 million in North America, including $54.2 million for the weekend proper. Again, that's not great. The Paramount and Skydance tentpole had been tracking to open to $90 million or more domestically, with the Tom Cruise starring film earning a glowing A cinema score from audiences and strong reviews. If current projections are right, the movie will boast the second best domestic opening of the franchise behind Mission Impossible 2, which posted a 5-day debut of $78.5 million, not adjusted for inflation. Dead Reckoning opened Wednesday in order to give the film more runway before Barbie and Oppenheimer opened on July 21st. Now, here's what has me concerned, Lauren. This is not altogether something that I did not foresee. You see, when I first started hearing the reviews of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, I thought, oh boy, we have another Top Gun coming. And that is going to reinvigorate everything that's going to really help the box office. When I went and saw the movie, though, I came away and gave it a 7.5 out of 10. And I said, it's a good movie, but it's not a great movie. And the problem with a good movie is that that's fine, but it's not enough to really pump up the box office. And that's what we're seeing now. Although it is liked by the majority of people, which gives it a very high Rotten Tomato score, it's still not all that great. It's really good in terms of stunts. It's really good in terms of Tom Cruise. But other than that, it's kind of struggling. Now, Lauren, I'm curious your thoughts on what it is that audiences are waiting for to go see. We're almost at the end of summer. Have we just had that bad of a summer and there's nothing that's going to captivate audiences?
I don't think it's just that. I think you've actually probably got a bunch of things going on here. In one case, I'm actually probably going to support the mainstream media a little bit. I think there may be some truth to the fact that we have now trained audiences to wait not necessarily for streaming, but for home video releases. Back in the day, you usually had something like a 3 to 4 month window from the theatrical release to some type of a home release. And we've now got that pared down to about 45 days. With the ticket prices being what they are, with concession prices being what they are, if I'm just taking my son to a movie, just him and me, It's going to be $50 at a minimum to go in and sit down, where I could just wait 45 days. And if I have a monthly subscription to some kind of streaming service, that's going to be no more than $20. And then we can watch it as many times as we want. I think in this economy, people are just being more frugal with their money. Another thing I think might be impacting this is that it's the first in a two-parter. And with word of mouth being what it is, I think people are maybe deciding that, well, if it's kind of a softer entry in the series, maybe we just wait for that reason as well. Wait till both movies are out, and then we can watch them both at the same time. I don't know how much that actually plays into a purchase decision, but I think the third factor is that word of mouth, and I think that's something that's really hurting Hollywood now. They've spent so much time deriding people who are not fans of what they're putting out, that I think the general audience has learned that we can't trust the critics. And so they're listening to their friends a lot more than they would any type of review that they might get in the mainstream media or um, uh, places like the
Rotten
trade. So,
Tomatoes, Metacritic,
yeah,
etc. And
yeah.
Lauren, that's not surprising because the mainstream media is not well trusted any longer, and they've earned every bit of mistrust that they have. Lauren, one of the things that our members have voted on us for discussion for this week is the fact also that Mission Impossible is going up against Oppenheimer in a very strange way. You see, Oppenheimer, the Christopher Nolan film, was filmed for IMAX with IMAX cameras. And it is going to be taking over those premium IMAX screens, taking that away from Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And that's creating quite the conundrum because although Oppenheimer was filmed with those types of cameras and is specifically made for IMAX, it seems clear to me that in terms of what people would like to see on IMAX screens, well, that's probably still Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, because when you go to an IMAX showing, you're probably wanting to see amazing stunts, you're wanting to see fantastic visuals, and perhaps you'll get some of that out of the Christopher Nolan historical film. But I think it is more conducive to show Mission Impossible, and yet due to the contractual obligations, IMAX screens are going to have to switch over to Oppenheimer, which may not be advantageous for their pocketbooks, for their purses. So, Lauren, do we need to maybe relook at the situation with IMAX screens in the future and not allocate them solely based on whether or not they were produced with IMAX in mind?
Well, I think that's entirely up to the theater owners. They're the ones that are going to have to work out those contracts, right?
Well, it's already been concluded, so they're
Right.
stuck with it for now. But yes,
In
that
this
is
case, right. But what I'm saying is that I think you're right that it would probably work out better for them financially if Mission Impossible was on the IMAX screens. But what we're talking here is artistic vision versus commercial viability. And I totally understand why Christopher Nolan would want to have the giant nuclear explosion on the biggest screen possible. As an artist, you want it to be displayed in the biggest, most bombastic way that you can.
right. The
So
biggest bomb on the biggest screen.
yeah, so I totally get why the fight happened. I even understand why the theater owners, before they maybe really thought about the scheduling, may have made that commitment beforehand. That may bite them commercially. Uh, I think that that's kind of what you're asking, though, is from a commercial standpoint, should they rethink it? Yeah, maybe. If they're wanting to make more money, then you're going to want to get more butts and seats for what's going to have the biggest financial draw. On the other
Well,
hand, Nolan, I think, is a pretty well-respected filmmaker. I think that he has some cachet in Hollywood, and so there's a little muscle there behind him too. So
Well, I would say that in the future they need to be more careful with the scheduling. There aren't that many movies which are apt to be shown on IMAX screens specifically, and so they should just be more mindful of the calendar, I suppose. Now, Lauren, I had
mhm.
mentioned that this box office report is one of the few times that I'm actually disappointed, and the reason I'm disappointed is because we needed Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One to come out and be another Top Gun Maverick. We needed that. We needed to be a 9 or a 10. And the reason is because, well, this has been such a terrible, lackluster summer. And it is no fault of the cinema owners, the theater owners, all the people who are involved in the business of movies, the movie business, minus the creators, right? The creators are the ones who hold the blame for this, but everybody else is the one, they're the ones who'll take the damage. They're the victims of it. And I was really hoping that Tom Cruise, before I saw this film, I was hoping that it would be that great. And then that truly would have reinvigorated everything. And once I saw the film and gave it a 7.5, I said, this is really not going to do it in my opinion. And I place the blame there also not on Tom Cruise at all or on Haley Atwell. It's a very strange film in that they messed up the CGI. The stunts are very impressive, and then for whatever reason they came in and they used too much CGI to, I don't know, to stylize those stunts and to hide things. And it's like, no, this was more impressive before you did this. You should have left it alone. But I want to go to this, Lauren. There's a major Twitter thread. You can see it's approaching 1 million views right now, and it's garnering a lot of attention, basically saying what is wrong with Hollywood. I want to read this. This was sent to me from someone inside Hollywood who wanted us to take a look at this, and I find it to be worthwhile. So let's read this through, and I want to get your thoughts on it. This by Arash Amel. It says, with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning looking very shaky at the box office this week, and that's true domestically, not true globally. It'll do fine overall. It looks like we are seeing a disastrous summer box office. Where did it go wrong? The answer is pretty simple. Risk aversion to original ideas or IP, rampant corporatization of movie studios as offshoots of media monoliths, and the reduction of the role of the creative movie executive to corporate brand manager, and the need to go bigger to please Wall Street because you see tired sequels of sequels of sequels with aging stars and tired formats as a result of a constant chase for growth and size. It's how we ended up with $300 million budgets and stale IP. No other business survives this level of negligence. In research and development, Hollywood is no exception. With the need to grow comes big budgets and fear of the new. We have no younger generation of bankable movie stars because we haven't invested in the type of theatrical movies that typically built them. Because studios abandon lower budget, original, or fresh intellectual property genre movies. The refrain that people won't go to smaller movies because of streaming is a cop-out, a lie, and pure fear, because it would involve a level of risk and creativity at studios that has long been wrung out of its ranks by Wall Street and upper management. I've seen great, incredible creative executives struggle. I've seen some of the best laid off, and the best of those who remain handcuffed to the same overblown, overpriced, and tired formats. Everywhere, the larger of creative properties have been exhausted. With that comes Indy 5, Fast 10, Mission Impossible 7, etc., parts 1, 2, 3, and onwards. Yet once upon a time, there was a Mission 1, Fast 1, Raiders, all made for budgets well below $100 million, starring young movie stars. And that truly is the underlying malaise, part of the new phenomenon of Americans' leaders aging out. Hollywood is no exception. We're in a death spiral. We have to win young audiences back. The only way out is to go back to the creativity and first principles. We need to go back to the kitchen, kickstart our R&D again, drop budgets, take risks on new stars, build new directors, original projects. Make 6 at $5 million or 3 at $100 million if you must, instead of 1 at $300 million. If you won't support Wall Street, but it will support a new cycle of growth. And maybe you end up becoming competitive again and getting that 16 to 34 crowd back in the theaters. And if anyone says it can't be done, it's simply because they're afraid of doing the creative work. Last tweet here. Money won't fix this problem. And MBA won't fix it either. Only creative risk will. But who's to blame? The same people who got us into the mess of a double actors and writer strike are the same ones responsible for the dire state of Hollywood, the Hollywood movie, Wall Street. Now, Lauren, that is a long way to say that much of the blame right now is being placed on Wall Street for Hollywood's issues. But I take issue with that to some degree. I'm on board with the fact that they have gotten too lazy and they won't take risks. Very happy to admit that. But at the same time, they're doing one of the riskiest things of all, which is to push their content into divisive areas that is dividing audiences and cutting off something like perhaps as much as 70% if we look at Disney, but surely 50% of the audience saying to them, we don't want you and we're not going to present material that you find worthwhile. Lauren, which side of this is right, or are both sides right?
I think both are to an extent. I kind of agree with you. I don't think you can place all the blame at Wall Street's feet. However, I disagree with the point that he's making there, which I stated earlier, which is that I think there is something to the fact that audiences aren't going out to the theaters because they know they don't have to wait very long for these movies to be released in other mediums that are cheaper. And in this economy, people are pinching pennies wherever they can. You can't afford to take a family out and spend $100 to go see a movie when if you wait just a month and a half, maybe it only costs you 20 to entertain everybody. So I think that's part of it. I do think there's an awful lot to be said. You were talking about poor CGI just a moment ago. Isn't it interesting that we're getting worse CGI now in almost all of the projects that we're seeing than what we had 10 to 15 years ago? I
And
think
unnecessary CGI, Lauren.
I,
CGI that we don't want.
I think a lot of the effects houses are struggling. I know that there have been some effects houses that have closed down. You've had some studios monopolizing the studios that do CGI work, like Marvel. Um, I'm looking at it a little bit like imagine you're a 5 year old and it's your birthday and you've got a giant birthday cake sitting in front of you. When you're 5 years old, you don't have any impulse control. You want to eat that whole cake. And at first, that sounds like a good idea. But before you know it, that cake is not going to be staying down. And I think that's a little bit of where Hollywood is at. They are getting bigger and more bombastic all the time until the audience is numbed. Their characters are paper thin, there's nothing to them, they're cardboard cutouts, and you don't always have to have more and bigger. What they're missing right now is characters and drama, something with some depth. We need to get back to having some movies. Look, I love action spectacles. I love popcorn movies. Those are really my favorite. I kind of like the pulpy stuff. Um, but you can have character dramas. You can have thrillers. You can have things like we had in the 70s, noir pictures with car chases that are all practical effects and don't cost that much. A drum that Valiant has been banging every week is that Disney is the only studio that is only trying to do tent poles, and you can see that they're suffering for it. This Twitter thread, I don't know if this was Twitter or not, but this thread that this was on is making the very same case. It's like, look, you have to have a diverse set of movies that you're putting out. Some that are low budget indie flicks, some that are mid tier, and then you can have the big blockbusters. But it can't all be blockbusters. You also want to create scarcity. You want to have the audience wanting to have it back after it leaves theaters. You don't go straight to pushing it out 45 days after the movie was in theaters. Let them wait. Let them build up that anticipation. Let them crave it. And then you drop it. You make some money on it. Bring back physical media. It will help.
And let's walk through this, Lauren, too, because there's going to be some criticism. You know, we were very harsh with Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, the budget that it has, the amount of money it's making. There are going to be people who say, well, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning cost the same amount of money to make, which is true. They're in the same ballpark. And then they're going to say, why aren't you being so harsh with Mission Impossible? And so I want to explain that for everyone. So, because we do really try hard here to just be truthful and to call balls and strikes. We're not trying to just be negative about Disney or to shade the news one way or the other. When it comes to Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny, that film is likely to wind up somewhere around $350 million total. Mission Impossible, if it follows the same trends, is going to make $750 million. That's a $400 million gap. Okay, that's a major difference. Huge, huge difference. But then on top of that, it actually gets worse for Indy because Indiana Jones: Dial of Destiny will go to Disney Plus. And what does that mean? Well, it means that Disney is going to keep that in-house and make no more money off of it. Whereas with Mission Impossible, it will go to streaming services which have contracts where they will pay Paramount, where they will pay Tom Cruise to have that film on streaming. And so it will make money after it leaves theaters. So the 750 for Mission Impossible is not the end. But for Indy, it is indeed. Now, Lauren, you were just talking about how audiences do probably feel divided. I want to show an important graph that has come to my attention, which I think really lays out something important that is happening across our media. This out of the Rabbit Hole 84 on Twitter, demand for racism exceeds the supply. And this chart is very interesting because it shows the term frequency in popular U.S. newspapers, that being the term racism. The New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal. And folks, you can see that 1970, 80, 90, 2000, it fluctuates some, but it follows a similar pattern. It stays somewhere in that same range. But this use of this term has exploded. And I suspect, Lauren, that this has something to do with intersectionality. I suspect that if you were to look at different issues within that same realm, not just race, but also gender, that you would see the same exact thing. That our society, and specifically our media, has become hyper focused, far beyond anything we've ever seen in regards to the issues of race and gender and equality and these things that sort of have been brought out of the Ivy League schools and now are all through our media. I don't know that it's reflective of what society is focused on, but I think this may be what is driving audiences away, not only from newspapers, but from the mainstream press, from TV and streaming, even sports, and especially movies. Lauren, what do you make of this idea that perhaps movies like The Little Mermaid or movies like this upcoming Snow White, even Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, which was hyper-focused again on handing the torch to someone who is not Indiana Jones and seems to have no positive character qualities in the film, but it's all about gender, it's all about sex, it's all about race. What do you make that perhaps that is what is causing audiences to exit?
Well, you remember that birthday cake analogy I just made? I
Absolutely.
I think that chart is showing it right there. Um, People go to movies because they want to have a good time with their families. They want to escape the day-to-day grind. They want to, at the end of the day, not every movie has to have a hopeful message, but generally, you're usually going to a movie to be entertained. You want to feel good at the end of it. I think the modern conception of movies for the last 10 years or so has been it almost harkens back to a Victorian age where suddenly we have these scolds that are telling us all of the things that are wrong in our society and wrong with us and how we have to change everything.
Meanwhile, Lauren,
And
we've eradicated poverty at levels never seen throughout human history. We've done so in like the last 20 years, beyond all of human history combined. And yet we focus only on the very worst of things, and we focus on it within such a narrow spectrum that we fail to recognize that there are huge issues beyond our borders, which continue, and by the way, are the source of all the little gadgets and doodads we have in our pockets, because there are actual real people out there being forced to make them against their will. But we hyper focus on these particular issues, and I just think that it's not ringing true or genuine with society anymore. I think the average person is tired of it.
I agree with you, but I also I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to hold yourself to a higher standard. I think that there are legitimate reasons to want to look at what's wrong in your own backyard, but you also have to have a sense of relative scale, and somehow we seem to have lost the ability to do that without wanting to get political at all. When you think of everything that I'm going to focus on America here because that's where I'm at, that the American public has gone through in the last, I think you could go as far as 20 years, but especially within the last 10 to 15, I think the populace is exhausted. And in a lot of ways, you're seeing some similarities to the national mood in the 70s. And that's when A New Hope came out. And at the time,
About
studios
Star
didn't
Wars,
want
by the way.
Right, and so studios, a lot of them passed on it. Even 20th Century Fox didn't want it. They thought it was this corny flick, and it was science fiction, and nobody liked science fiction. And it was kind of a doofy, optimistic kind of a picture, and yet it hit with the audience because they needed something like that. They needed something hopeful after everything that had gone on in the past decade. I think if we get something like that, if we had a new Harry Potter, for instance, you remember what kind of an earthquake Harry Potter was. If something like that were to come along again and ignite the imagination and a hopeful attitude in an audience, I think that you could have a resurgence of the box office as people want to consume something like that. People need hope. And right now, they're not getting it. What they're getting are screeds and lectures, and people will tune out because of that. They already have enough to feel bad about. They don't need to pay somebody else to make them feel worse.
Lauren, speaking of all of that, that's why I guess I'm disappointed about Mission Impossible. I wanted it to be something like that, and it has all the right ingredients. The cake just didn't come out of the oven exactly the way you would hope for, to finish off that analogy. But one thing that did come out just right, we have cues from you. This is our ongoing weekly feature where we have members of the channel for the WDW Pro channel send in their questions and we answer them. We've got 9 questions today. We will be quick, but we also give them the due diligence they deserve. And folks, if you would like to drop in questions, just become a member of the channel by clicking the join button. It is the price of a soda each month, and you'll get all kinds of exclusive content. Lauren, would you be willing to read this first question from Stephen Hold'em?
Yep, let's go. What are your thoughts on the possibility that Disney Plus will not exist in 2 to 3 years? I can certainly see that it could be rolled into Hulu or similar, which may allow the company to focus on fewer shows of higher quality if they are not attempting to fill a whole channel with in house content.
Stephen, you're on the exact right track here, except that instead of Disney Plus being dissolved and Hulu taking over, instead Hulu will be rolled in almost certainly as its own blade inside Disney Plus. And that has more to do with Disney not wanting to lose the Disney brand and how important that Disney Plus moniker is to the company, rather than probably what would be best for them overall monetarily. Hulu is the better and bigger streamer, but Disney, they want to keep Disney Plus at all costs. Great question. Lauren, take the next one.
Stuttering Guitarist 4731 asks, if a movie takes 3 to 5 years from concept to release, isn't Iger's extension just pushing back something people want to see or be a part of even farther?
Well, in terms of things changing at the Walt Disney Company, unless his business person acumen takes over, and he decides that he is going to change the course, change the direction of this company, then you're exactly right, Stuttering Guitarist. And part of what we're watching here is not only is Iger going to be there at the Walt Disney Company for far, far longer, but this time from concept to release is going to be extended due to the writer strike, which is now the actor strike, which is now the Hollywood strike. So I don't think Iger is having very much of a fun time. All right, I'll take this next one. This is from Man of WDW. Like the ending there. I want your opinions on that potential embezzlement that has gone on at Lucasfilm. If Bob, talking about Iger, was smart about this, couldn't he quietly force Kathleen out of the company with no repercussions on Disney? Well, Man of WDW, the issue I would take here is that we have absolutely zero evidence whatsoever for any kind of embezzlement happening. And we have to be extraordinarily careful when we report on the news or when we report on rumors. There is no evidence for this that I am aware at all. And in fact, we looked at this on the Pro Show and on the Valiant Renegade Show. And one of the issues here is that were this to have occurred, it would have been done over and over and over in increments of 20,000. Tiny, tiny amounts. And that's due to the structural way that these Lucasfilm projects are set up for tax reasons inside the United Kingdom. So I don't buy into this at all. And although I love the question and I love your curiosity on it, we need to be very careful about which things we buy into, depending on their ability to actually come into reality. All right, Lauren, take this next one.
Darth Apathy asks, totally outside of our usual IPs and not Disney related, but Amazon's Fallout. Know anything? Right now, this is the only one of my favorite franchises I have any hope for since Todd is involved.
Lauren, any thoughts on this one?
I don't really know anything about it, so I'm going to have to defer to you on this.
Well, the good news, Darth Apathy, is that while I do not have any new information on Amazon's Fallout, we are hearing significant, let's say, speculation for now that Amazon is getting ready to be a bigger and bigger player in entertainment at large. So I can't say too much about that yet. We're following up on it. But just know that if Amazon is getting ready to spend more money on entertainment, then perhaps Fallout will be a beneficiary of that as well. All right, Vixeris says, so with Iger staying at the box office issues, what kind of release date shuffle is next? More delays or moving things like Avatar up to get a possible box office hit ASAP? Lauren, what do you think they're going to do with some of these issues with the box office where they are not going to have much content? What do you think they could do to sort of relieve this issue, especially if the strike goes on and on?
I don't know what kind of shuffling that they could do with the things that are in the pipeline because I don't think there's anything positive there. And you don't really want to have a continuing string of bad news. So I think the best thing that they could do is something that they're already maybe doing a trial balloon with here in Q3 or Q4, which is when they're going to put a bunch of classic things from their catalog back out in the theaters. I think that may allow them to break up some of the bad news And if it's successful, I mean, it doesn't cost them really anything to put these out. It does allow them to make some money. And if they do well with it, then they may push that out into next year as well and maybe try and have a better news cycle.
Great points, Lauren. And I wish that as they put out some of that classic content, that they would take the time to put it out in 3D or upscale it even higher or do something, maybe a director's cut, whatever it takes to give extra incentive to go to the theaters. I really am worried about those theater owners. All right, Death Scythe 39. This one's long, so let me read this one. Just watched the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 on Prime last weekend with my girlfriend. She insisted on it after she said she hated it. I liked it, though, but have you all noticed all the scenes where Nebula was clearly played by a man with Nebula's head placed on by shoddy CGI? I wasn't even looking for those scenes, but they were also obvious. The perfect example was in Act 3 in Fight in the Tunnel, a constant swap between man's body when fighting and Karen Gillan when out of combat. If I were campy, I would have been looking for certain body parts and probably would have found them. What a pathetic CGI and editing coming out of Disney in those past 3 to 4 years. Or that's what we were just talking about, is how bad CGI has become. How about that, eh?
Yeah, it's very noticeable, and the only thing that I can think of is that the studios are overtaxed. I think that between having constant script rewrites and changes on the back end and forcing crunch time, I think it's just affecting the product.
And it's a real shame, too, because they really muddied up the amazing stunt of Tom Cruise riding that bike off the edge of the mountain. The CGI really muddled it. Space Dave 2000, who's a VI Pro member. Lauren, read that one for us.
Is it just me, or is failure actually translated to success in Hollyweird in big business? I'd never seen so much failing up in my life. Yikes.
Well, it only goes so far, I'll tell you that. Eventually, what goes up must come down. And when up is fail, well, get ready.
There
Indy
is one other
Phantom,
place that there's one other place that you see it that you didn't mention there.
politics, right?
That's the one.
There you go. Indy Phantom says, I thought the Haunted Mansion trailer was okay, but it's an ancient IP and it feels way too much like the previous version. Will it be a sleeper or another Disney summer dud? It's crowded out there. Indy Phantom, the end of summer and August, that's where they send the movies to die. So with it being Haunted Mansion, perhaps that's apropos. And finally, we have Rob Weisenhunt. Go ahead and take that one, Lauren.
With concepts like zero profit and growth for the sake of growth, is it time for businesses to reevaluate operation philosophies that are unsustainable, even cannibalistic?
Absolutely. And particularly, of course, Disney is one of these. If you think about it, the Walt Disney Company at one time had significantly higher box office revenues. But then not only that, but every one of those movies would go on to a secondary market of physical media releases with DVDs, Blu-rays, etc. Then they would do all of these extra releases on that of special editions, and that drove redundant income streams off of each one of these properties. Now they have a 70% reduction in box office revenues from 2019 until today, and then that's it. It just goes to Disney Plus, and none of that was necessary. Disney did this to itself, and the industry did it to itself as well, although the industry was at least a wee bit smarter and set up at least some safeguards for the rest of the studios and companies involved. So excellent points there. Lauren, any final thoughts on the topics that we've covered today in our video about the box office this weekend, the disappointment slightly of Mission Impossible, and what is wrong with Hollyweird?
I think what's going to be interesting for me is seeing if there's anything that becomes a sleeper hit that we're not expecting. It doesn't look to me like there's very much good news on the horizon. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this year shakes off. The one question mark I think I have is weirdly the Haunted Mansion that we were just talking about. To me, it looks awful. I know the last version didn't do well.
It looks
But
Disney Channel.
it does, but I'm thinking about that Hocus Pocus sequel that they did a little while ago,
That's a
and
great point.
I'm wondering maybe if that might garner a certain audience. I'm curious to see how that turns out.
Well, hope springs eternal, but I don't think this is going to have the Hocus Pocus effect. But I do find it amusing how quickly they greenlit Hocus Pocus 3. When Disney gets a hit these days, they will strangle every dollar out of it they can because they are far fewer and between. All right, Lauren, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you on this great, big, beautiful web?
You can find me at that Park Place, at Lauren Connor on Twitter, and at Lauren Connor 9030 on YouTube.
Folks, this video today is brought to you by the members of the channel. They selected the topic, They selected the questions we would answer. We appreciate and love our members. They are not taken for granted here. We have an attitude of gratitude for each and every one. They are the electricity that drives it all. Lauren drives much of it as well. We love having Lauren on each and every time. Ladies and gentlemen, although our conversation has come to an end, the commentary begins. Please drop a comment down below. We cover your comments. We care about what you think. Drop a like, share, subscribe. And when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.